Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us live. My name is Sean Phillips. As always, I am joined alongside my two co-hosts, Mr. Andy Van Beber and Travis Kirkendall. Gentlemen, how are you today on this lovely Monday evening?
Oh, well, it's the day before I actually have to go back to work. I get to be a working man again.
Oh, shoot. That's right.
Yeah,
You got to go back to reality.
I know. Stop living off my wife and everything.
Well,
Okay, I was off today too.
Let it go.
Nice.
Don't answer that. Don't come up with anything smart aleck there.
Wasn't gonna. I actually got more distracted by Travis saying that he had a day off. That is nice.
You did have the day off. Well, nice.
I had the day off today.
Nice.
The one site, I guess the crane operator wasn't able to get to the building, so they shut that down for today. And the other one, they were all waiting there for permission to even work on the site. So they're like, don't even bother coming here. We're about to leave. It's like, okay, see ya.
Man, well, I wish I could say the same thing. I was busy all day today. It's been quite the wild last 2 weeks getting back to work now. So definitely playing catch up from vacation. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say,
unfortunately, is.
So once school starts back up, you're going to be start planning all your visits and everything like that, right?
Yeah, I'm already talking to a couple of my counselors and getting all that kind of stuff lined up. The issue is there's a couple schools that, fingers crossed, will hopefully be able to work with this year. The issue is I wasn't able to last year. So there's a lot of point of contacts that I just don't have and I haven't made yet. So, people are asking, are you talking to this person? I'm like, I just don't know these people yet. So that's going to be the big thing of this year, is getting to know those VIPs, those point of contacts, to get in the classrooms, to work with individuals and students and stuff like that. So then my life will hopefully be a lot easier. We'll see. Yeah. Once high school's in and able to get in front of students and stuff, it's easier, because typically the way that what I've learned about recruiting is, like, those that are out of high school, they will pretty much come to you. You'll still find some by going out and searching, but those that are out of high school that are wanting to serve will find you. Whereas, like, high schoolers, you spark that idea by being there. So that's kind of the difference between the two. So,
and we do want to emphasize this week, and Sean kind of touched on it last week. If you're just joining in, you're jumping in on the conversation today, we would ask that you would share our podcast to your timeline tonight, so other folks can watch it and maybe jump on who normally wouldn't jump on. We would really appreciate that. We're going to be pushing that the next couple of weeks, so please be sharing our podcast to your own timeline. We'd appreciate it. Give us a little comment in there. It'd be great. But just want to get that free promotion there before we got started tonight.
No, yeah, absolutely. And again, yeah, if you guys are watching, please do give it a like, give us a share, comment down below. We'd love to get your thoughts, especially on our topic today, just because I know our topic is pretty near and dear to us here on the show. And it's really just been a roller coaster, especially over the last weekend and the last couple of days. There's been substantial changes, and I want to get your guys' thoughts, and I'll go over my thoughts here in a little bit. But for those at home listening, the main thing we're going to be talking about today is naturally what we're seeing in the news, the withdrawal of American troops in Afghanistan, what this means right now and what this means moving forward. So first, there's a lot to package. This honestly might be something that we roll into next week with as well, just because God only knows what's going to change.
There's so much.
So I know Andy had talked a little bit about some of the comparisons that are already being thrown around with the withdrawal from Afghanistan to the withdrawal from Vietnam. So, Andy, with you being the expert or having more knowledge of the Vietnam withdrawal, I'd love to get your thoughts and your words.
Well, where I want to go with this, let me start out by saying, before we even start making comparisons, I've had a couple of conversations on Facebook. Our local representative, Chad Perkins, and he had a discussion on his Facebook And Murdog says our broadcast is coming in very choppy. I'm sorry to hear that, Murdog.
It's probably his shitty internet, so it'll be all right.
Well, let's not mix words any, shall we? But, but what I wanted to bring in tonight, we have a history, and we can go throughout our history of when we have gotten involved in other countries' politics and other countries' civil wars. We have a string of it, and I know that we have a lot of different generations who tune into our podcast. And it seems, the earliest memories that I can think of us getting involved in other countries, when I teach in history, probably the United States' first involvement in another country was during the Spanish-American War, and we quote-unquote, gave independence to the Philippines. And that ended up being a civil war between us and the Filipino people. You move forward into the mess that is still Korea. You look at Vietnam, and Vietnam was probably the hottest spot of the Cold War when we wanted to stop the spread of communism, and there was a popular theory amongst politicians called the domino theory, that if we let one communist country in Southeast Asia take over, the rest of them will just fall down, and they'll go from Cambodia to Laos to Thailand to whatever. And so we made it a point, we provided military advisors as early as 62 or 63. And once we thought that we knew best in that situation. And in doing so, the people of Vietnam were used to a dictatorship. The people of Vietnam, that's what they knew for 2 or 3 generations. Even before the communists came in, they were ruled by the Japanese. They were influenced by the Chinese. They had heavy influence. They had corrupt politicians, and that's all they ever knew. And so when communism came along and provided and promoted, we're going to get rid of corruption and we're going to get rid of outside influence. And after World War II, when North and South Vietnam were actually divided up, and then it came to, there was going to be a vote whether or not to unite Vietnam and whether or not to accept communism. So before we let that vote happen, we intervened, and it was not a popular time. When you look at what's going on in Afghanistan, and this, we'll probably have some discussion, like you said, Sean, that'll spill over into next week, but the comparison that I want to make here is, let's look at the history of Afghanistan. Okay, Afghanistan actually was a Cold War player, if you will, as far back as 1979. Okay, so the Soviet Union was becoming very imperialistic and taking over all we call them the stands: Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. And they wanted to take over Afghanistan. And what is not told a lot is that we empowered local warlords to go into Afghanistan. We took CIA trained operatives and we put into place in Afghanistan to fight against the Russians. One of those happened to be a young member of a wealthy South Beach family they were native to Afghanistan, who ran a string of dry cleaners in Florida called the Bin Laden family. And so we basically put Osama bin Laden where he was at in control, in a place to where he could fight effectively. And they did. Afghanistan was the Soviet Union's own little Vietnam. And they were fighting against local warlords. They weren't fighting against organized units. They weren't fighting against, and so after the Soviets were driven out of Afghanistan, Afghanistan basically was run by warlords, and in different parts, and sooner or later you have a caliphate that is set up, and you have Sharia law that goes on, and a loss of civil rights by, if you're not, if you were a Shiite Muslim, you were probably going to be eradicated. If you were a woman, you had no rights. You were a second-class citizen. You were treated like trash. And then from that, you have little pocket terrorist groups that, as you guys know, then were the masterminds behind 9/11. And so then after 9/11, 2001, we go into we find out that the Taliban is actually hiding the people who were behind, and Osama bin Laden behind the bombing of the Twin Towers, and we go in there. So the similarities are very similar. We're trying to push on. They're similar and they're not similar. Let me just put it that way. They're similar in the fact that these people were used to. They were used to being, under Sharia law. They were used to being under an oppressive rule. But when you put in, when you're trying to put democracy in a place that has never seen democracy. I mean, heck, before the Soviets, Afghanistan was purely tribal. Okay, and they were ruled by whoever the powerful rulers were. And now we're seeing. And the comparison goes even farther when you see the last days of Kabul, when you see the Chinook helicopter airlifting the people out of the American embassy as the Taliban's coming in the front door, just like the North Vietnamese were charging into the Saigon American embassy, as as we were airlifting off the top. So I mean, American involvement, I think there's good intentions that are at play, but when good intentions get put into place, you have a lot of, and then there's aid and there's money that comes in, and you get greedy pockets and you get corrupt politicians, and you can't win for losing. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I've been kind of quiet about it because I told you guys beginning of the show, I really, I don't know how I feel about everything that's happened. I mean, it sucks to see. I mean, for starters, the pictures that you talked about with the two Chinooks from like Saigon, and then the embassy in Afghanistan. It's like, it's really eerie how symbolic it is and how identical the situations are with it. And then Sean, you mentioned one picture was like the people jumping out of the Twin Towers and then the people falling off the airplanes flying away. I mean, it's just very, you put those pictures side by side and you look at the timeline differences. It's really, it's just weird. It's really, really weird. It's been a weird day.
Travis, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience that you had when you were in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so I did a 9-month deployment in 2017 to 2018 to Afghanistan. Our mission, and the mission at the time, what the U.S. military was trying to do is they were trying to train the Afghan military to fight for themselves, for this democracy that the U.S. was backing. And we were kind of in a weird phase because the Army at the time was coming up with a new program, a new unit that was specifically designed to start training foreign militaries, kind of like what Special Forces were doing already, but the Army was kind of expanding their program with it a little bit. So we were kind of like one of the last combat brigades to be doing this mission set. So it was a little interesting seeing that transition, but our job at first was to protect the advisors. So the role in the war at the time was we were advising the Afghan military, the Afghan national police, to kind of helping them figure out their military, figure out how they need to fight the Taliban, the Haqqani crime family, Al Qaeda, all the organizations over there. And so at first we were kind of in that role of just, we call it guardian angel, which is basically, you protect these advisors on their meetings with the Afghan officials. And then halfway through, I got sent to a different base, and this was about 6 months. I was only at this first place for 3 months, and I spent the remainder of my time at this new base. And our mission there was, this was a really big base back in the day. It was originally called Fob Shank for people who served over there. And our mission there was to rebuild a portion of this base for the new Army units that I was telling you gentlemen about. We were rebuilding this base so that the new units who are going to be training the Afghan military have a place to advise from. It was going to be either like what they called an advisory point. And we spent, I mean, God, the millions of dollars that went into rebuilding this base was just incredible. I mean, the U.S. government spent so much damn money on this project, and it was just this project. They were rebuilding a couple other bases, I believe. But yeah, even then, I mean, the mission was, it was different than what it was 10 years ago. I mean, God, now it was just train the military to fight for themselves. And, they were equipped. I mean, we provided them with, we gave them all the old U.S. military bases and like the old like forward operating bases in the mountains and stuff. We gave that all to the Afghan military.
They were well equipped.
Oh yeah, I mean, they all had guns. They had the Toyota Hilux, which if you don't know about the Toyotas, they're invincible. So they had they had aircraft. They had they were well equipped. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the thing too. Like they were well equipped. And we were also advising them, like helping them like get more organized, help them figure out how they needed to get more supplies, stuff like that. And I mean, we were paying them. I mean, Biden gave that speech today and he's right. They were paid by us. Like we were supporting their military to do this. We were trying to, quote unquote nation build. We really were. So I ended up leaving 2018. The Army, like I said, they made that transition to the new training operation that they were trying to do. And I think it was like a year and a half or 2 years later, that base that we had worked on rebuilding and pulling. So my job specifically there was these engineers were building the base. My job was to protect the engineers, and we would sit out for like 16 hours a day and just protect these people. Anyway, long story shorter, like a year and a half or 2 years later, they shut the base down completely, just gave up on it, gave it to the Afghans. So here you go. You can have this base that we just built up. So it's really weird to see, the Army had put so much money into just rebuilding these bases, and building these units up too, these new military units of ours to go train these guys. And all the equipment that we spent not only on the Afghan military, but just all the new supplies and new technology and stuff we were giving to our new military units to go over there and train them. And then to see a complete policy change and this, like, we're not going to do that anymore. Just millions of dollars wasted.
And I do want to bring up something. You bring up an interesting point there too, Travis, about you say policy change. So from what I've been reading, Trump was. Am I correct in understanding that Trump was planning something similar?
As far as leaving?
Yes.
I believe that was his plan. He had met with I think that was a real thing. He had met with the Taliban, or they had talked with Taliban in 2020 about like, hey, we're going to, he had mentioned that he was going to leave. Like that wasn't, I don't think it was a question of America leaving. It was just
how it was going to be done.
How it was going to be done, I think is what the hot topic is. I think America was going to leave, whether Trump was still president or not. I think it's just how we went about doing it. I think would have been different. And we can speculate how Trump would have done it. I don't think that's going to be productive at all. But
yeah, and that's the other thing too. I mean, we can go back as far as Obama. Obama had talked about. Well, Obama did start to pull out from Iraq, and I don't know.
My understanding, though, under his presidency, from I'd served with guys I served with, from their experience, there was a lot of issues when he became president. There was a lot of policy changes that really screwed things up over there. And not to put the blame on any one president or any political party, but I think ultimately what we've seen, in my opinion, the failure of Afghanistan was on the U.S. government. They could not consistently stick with a damn plan on what they wanted to do with that country. And you had multiple policy changes, multiple rules of engagement changes, soldiers having no idea what they're even doing there anymore. And it's like, you do 20 years of change. It's like, imagine World War II and our leadership was like, well, we don't know if we want to attack Germany anymore. Well, we don't know if we want to, if they would have just been like changing their mind constantly about how they wanted to proceed with the war, do you think we would have won World War II?
Well,
it's a different situation.
And and you also have to consider too, I mean, we saw this we first saw this in Vietnam, was number one, media perception. When you start perceiving, World War II, when you talk to, and I've had the pleasure of sitting down and talking to guys who were on the beaches at Normandy. Back when I was in middle school, we had World War II vets who were, and at that time in the 80s were in their, 60s and 70s. And these guys were coming in and they were probably sharing more with us than what we probably needed to hear. But but there were some graphic stories that were, how they treated German troops. There was, some of these guys who would be so pissed because of how they had heard how Germans had treated, our guys, and and the stories about what they'd done to Jews. They'd pop forget Geneva Convention, pop these guys straight in the head when they come to them.
There's that story from Band of Brothers. His Lieutenant Spiel gave them all a cigarette and then he fucking shot them all.
Yeah. And so, but now, I mean, what was, when sometimes I forgot where it was at. It might have been when we went into Libya, or when we went into Iraq.
There's another disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Libya and Iraq both. But what was funny was that CNN and Fox and all the news guys were on the ground, and they had cameras there as the invading forces were coming in. Mm-hmm. The media is on the ground covering that. The office of what was it called, the OWI in World War II, the Office of War Information, they controlled exactly what was being said, done, and everything went through them in, before it got to us. Fast forward to Vietnam, if you've ever watched, Robin Williams, one of his best movies was Good Morning Vietnam. And there's parts in that movie where they talk about how, the censors were saying, okay, you can say this and you can say this and you can say this, but don't talk about this, 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 and this, because some of this broadcast is being picked up shortwave radio back home. And Robin, and so there was this push to being the control of what, I mean, my question is this: how much do the people need to know what's exactly, from what you saw in Afghanistan, Travis, how much do the American people need to know as to what was going on the ground in Afghanistan?
I mean, they have a right to know. I mean, there was a lot of taxpayer dollars going into the effort over there. I just think there was a lack of coverage of what was really going on. And
so
the fact that CNN has to make a news article in 2021 telling people who the Taliban actually are and what's going on in Afghanistan is pretty mind-boggling, considering we've been at war for 20 years.
Yeah,
and I think that has a lot to do with the media narratives out there. And what's important and what's not.
Well, and that's the other thing too. I think the government, when you look at World War I and World War II, it was rally around tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree and support the troops, be behind the boys, and when the boys come home, we're going to be celebrating them as we're America. May she never be in the wrong, may she always be in the right, and there was that push. Korean War, not so. It was there, okay.
Forgotten war, right?
The forgotten war, though, because we didn't really win it. In Vietnam, we got our butts handed to us. I mean, just
We didn't win.
We didn't win, okay. And so then you start having this, the baby boomer generation during the Vietnam War start questioning authority and saying, okay, do we really need to be involved in these places? And that's the debate. I'm sure you could find people today who would say, "Oh, we had no business being in Afghanistan." Listen, I would never stand by and watch women being treated like trash. When you see how, before our involvement, I'm old enough to know about what was going on. Pictures from the Taliban, one picture of how a woman had been cheated. She had been caught in adultery in Afghanistan, and this group of these Taliban dudes standing around her, and this is on YouTube, and these guys were.
Oh, it's terrible.
They were literally picking up these boulders and then just dropping them on this woman's head, and I'm thinking.
Oh, it's terrible what happens over there.
I mean, what happens in these countries is just still barbaric, and I think that we do need to be, behind. We need to be behind the effort of modernizing these nations. But can we make these play? I mean, are we? Where is the line at where we say, okay, how? And I hate to say that I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, that I agreed with Joe Biden, though, when he said, how much more do we need to do for these guys? I mean, you guys train these guys, we've given them all this stuff and we've done all these things. At what point are they going to take responsibility for themselves? Were we their sugar daddies and we were just feeding them with all the stuff and they were expecting us to take care of the problem for them, or what?
Well, I sent you guys, they interviewed a general on Fox News. I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to that. And basically the way he was saying is, number one, the Afghan military isn't a very big and powerful military. Like, it's not. The reason why they were so successful in keeping the Taliban at bay, and this is true, is that because the U.S. was providing their military with intelligence on the Taliban, and we were providing them air support, which were two huge things that were keeping the Taliban surge from coming back. And even when I was in country, they had kept Taliban at bay. Like, they were pretty much on they kept them at the border of, what's that country there? Pakistan. They kept them pretty much right at the border the entire time, even during the fighting season. So it's, there's a lot of issues with it because, if we're talking about nation building, the problem with Afghanistan, and this is still true, Afghanistan is still very tribalistic. You have the government in the capital, Kabul, but the problem is there's a lot of these villages out there that don't follow under Kabul. Like, they don't see themselves as under that government. And number two, they don't even speak the same language. There's Pashto and Dari, and I think I want to say there's one or two other ones that are like forms of that language. So there really is like different people within Afghanistan. They're not all just Afghans, as people would say. So it's a very strange country to try to implement a democracy like that. But again, you talk about the human rights issues and the atrocities that the Taliban, Al Qaeda, and these people have done. It's terrible. And I think a lot of these people, at one point I did say, we need to leave Afghanistan. We need to leave. I did believe that. I'm not happy with how we're doing it. I still think, eventually this needs to end. But at the same time, it's just, I don't know. I I've been speechless about this all day. How I really feel about it. I think it's the people who have never been to a third world country before, like actually seen the stuff that goes on, are the ones that are so quick to say that, quit these useless foreign wars. Why are we over there? I think that's really the crowd that's so quick to jump against it. But I see the argument on both sides, and that's why I'm really in the middle on this. It's just sucks to see.
Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, a lot. There's been a lot that's kind of run through my head the last couple of days because I've been following this pretty closely. It's wild. I've seen friends and family members that have sacrificed time, have spent time over in Afghanistan. And one thing that a lot of people I just don't think are considering is that Afghanistan is not going to be the only cookie to crumble in that region. This is, I feel like the next couple of years, it's going to be a kind of chain reaction that we're going to see in the Middle East. Withdrawal from Afghanistan was needed. Even President Trump was agreed with that and had started to make some of the moves to do so. However, Biden almost seems like and I'm not even just talking about his vacation at Camp David right now, but it literally seems like he feels like he's got anything else to do than deal with this nonsense. And what I mean by that is, let's not forget the amount of allies, U.S. and even like British citizens that are currently living in Afghanistan that are now potentially stranded.
Well, all the contractors over there too.
And there was no transitional process. And if they want to try to argue, this started like, we have been there for 20 years. You don't withdraw that kind of amount of people and that kind of amount of establishment in a month. The way that they has been unheard of. And guess what? They're sending 6,000 U.S. troops back. Their 6,000 U.S. troops are now mobilized and in Afghanistan now to evacuate those individuals. And God only knows what's going to happen with run-ins with the Taliban. And of course, like as we saw in his press conference, President Biden spoke about how if, the Taliban, if they make any moves to attack any U.S. forces while evacuating these individuals, then they'll be met with deathly consequences and a fiery wrath. And it's just like, man, you couldn't have missed the mark more on this entire situation. I think the big thing that's troubling me is I'm a big human rights activist and believer wholeheartedly. And I think what's different about now, what hit me the hardest today, I shed tears over this, was I saw this video of these Afghan people running. They were headed towards the Kabul airport as gunshots, whether or not they were Taliban, regardless, were going off. And this woman was holding a young girl about my daughter's age, about Julian's age. And I see her face, I see her confusion as they're running, as these gunshots are going around. And this is a little girl, and she's wearing like sandals. She doesn't have a head covering. She's wearing like normal clothes. Her mother's wearing normal clothes. And I'm watching this, and all I can think of is the next 72 hours are this little girl who's Julian's age, who I've seen that same look of, what's going on here kind of face over little things that Julian makes. Who knows what's going to happen to that child? Who knows what's going to happen to that mother? All because they're women wearing sandals. I mean, there are already videos of Taliban militants going into homes and shooting women. I have seen reports of educated women are getting rid of their school artifacts. Anything that they had to do with school, they are getting rid of. Stores are being raided to buy clothes that they can wear to cover their bodies up out of fear of what is going to happen if they are seen without the proper coverings what the Taliban would consider proper coverings. I fear for the women of the Afghan army, especially. And the thing is, guys, like, what I don't think people understand, this isn't like these women are going to get locked up and put into camps or something. That would be the absolute best case scenario. These women are a point is going to be made publicly. These women, and I say women and girls, children, adolescent girls, are going to be murdered. They're going to be raped. They're going to be beaten. They're going to be trafficked. And we are seemingly casually just going to let this happen. And it's a shame. When it comes to things like the Taliban, it doesn't matter what we do, as far as we will not change their minds. Okay. When it comes to Islamic radicals, are just as radical as like radical Christians, right? Like those evangelicals that are sitting there yelling at snakes. And, you take the worst of the worst where they, create cults where people are eating cyanide pills and feeding their kids cyanide pills. This is the same thing. Religious radicals are going to do crazy shit. The issue is we now have one of the most violent group of religious radicals now in control of an entire nation after they've been fighting and chomping for that control for about 20 years now. They finally have it. And they are going to show the world exactly what kind of business they mean. Aside from the human rights issues, which to me are the most troubling. As a girl dad, it genuinely breaks my heart to see and know what's going to happen. And more so than anything, when I see the videos of the planes and people flying, it's almost like one of those Titanic moments to me where I'm like, get the women and children on board and get them the hell out of there, because so there's the human rights thing. And we move on to Travis. We had talked a little bit about now that America's gone, who's gonna fill the hole? We talked about how Chinese companies have been mining there and drilling there and have established footholds in Taliban hotspots and the Taliban's not messing with China in these regions. Probably because China said, if you do mess with us, wait and see. We're not the Americans. We, as far as morals and standards,
we don't have them.
We don't exactly have those in the way that you think we might. All right. We already don't give a shit what the world's thinking. Okay. We don't have woke leaders, right? We're not trying to have. I saw a thing that made me laugh, even though I shouldn't have, and it was like something along the lines of, after all it's said and done, at least we have Emma with two moms fighting for our freedoms. There's also groups like Russia. And here's the thing too. It's not going to be this super peaceful event. Let's not forget that in China, they have Muslim hostages.
Yeah.
At the base of the Himalayas.
Yep.
Okay. But that's not to say they might not try to turn. This is all speculation.
Indoctrination
I would
camps.
not be surprised to see if China wouldn't try to make the effort to eradicate the Taliban and turn a nation like Afghanistan into a communist state. I wouldn't be surprised. The resources are there. That's not something that would happen overnight.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen overnight. I could see communist imperialism has gone by the wayside since, and again, I'm going to halfway disagree with you on that one, Sean, because I mean, communism has not been in the business of imperialism. Now, take aside the Ukraine and the Georgia situation in Russia. Take that aside because that's an internal struggle. But as far as one communist state going into another place, I mean, I'm almost sure that even though that the Chinese don't always pay attention to their history books, I think that they do see that they hopefully they would see
there's such thing of too much of a good thing,
right? And it's just like, but
they see their North Korean cousin, how he acts,
right? Yeah. But I do agree with you though on the fact that if China did try to go in there, I mean, I think they would definitely lay down the law. They wouldn't put up with any crap because, I mean, China doesn't care. You're right. You're exactly right on that. When it comes to human rights, the Chinese turn the TV cameras off. They block the satellite signal, and they'll go in and
literally go, do you see what we're doing to our own people here? We do not give a shit.
Right. And I mean, 1989, the Student Revolution, when that happened, before they cleansed Tiananmen Square, they shut off and they blocked all satellite signal going in and out, and all they had was a landline. Dan Rather, or whoever it was that was on the ground there in Tiananmen Square, somehow had I don't know, it probably was the early bag phone or whatever it was, and he was reporting what was going on and seeing. That's the only record that we ever had of what happened in Tiananmen Square, and to say Afghanistan, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, and Travis, maybe you can address this. I mean, how organized are the Taliban? I mean, do they have a top-down leadership? Is it a bureaucratic leadership, or is it just one guy at the top who's
No, they're organized. To my understanding, they're organized. There's different leaders and different levels.
Yeah, because if you look at how they've been spaced out, it's what's funny is like when outside looking in looks at it, right? Like when they think like Taliban or they think these armies, they just think of like they're the what were they called, from Star Wars, the Sand people, what were the Tusken Raiders, right? They think it's like gun and run. No, they're very strategically trained. I mean, oftentimes these are individuals that were part of the Afghan army at one point or trained by the CIA, or these are individuals like
it's very
a fun fact is what a lot of people don't know too is like, look at Guantanamo Bay. I would say like there's a really big chunk of those individuals that are at Guantanamo Bay that like were educated in America, went to college in America, like quite a few. It's the same thing with individuals over there. These are
those guys, right?
Oh yeah. And so these are educated, a lot of English speaking individuals like throughout, and I mean, they're not dumb. They literally have copy and pasted like the tactics used against them and have created a fairly organized military, and like I'll agree with Joe Biden where he said the Afghan military rolled over like a dog.
Yeah.
There was zero effort given, at least that we're seeing. I mean, Kabul was taken without a shot fired, I feel like, which is, maybe was it fear for their own lives? Was it fear for the lives of the people? The president of Afghanistan fled. He's gone, grabbed his family, and he bounced out. And no one's heard from him. it's murky to say the least. Another thing that I saw that's troubling is the Taliban now owns more Black Hawk helicopters
I
than
was
like
just about to say something.
166 nations in the world. The United States failure to get rid of or take back some of the I mean, I was watching one of the videos of the airport where, you know, there weren't U.S. troops at any rate. And there were like some of these vehicles that like Oshkosh vehicles that were rolling around that I'm not sure if they were Afghan army or Taliban, but holy shit. These are very well equipped, very badass military vehicles that now are in the hands of these individuals. And these are the same vehicles that we were using. All right. This is not like this is outdated technology.
So earlier this year, when the U.S. withdrew from Bagram Air Base, which was the biggest base in Afghanistan, it's where everybody went before they went out to wherever they were supposed to go. They left without telling the Afghan military anything. They just disappeared in the night and literally left all the trucks. I'm talking up-armored fighting vehicles, just left everything, left tons of equipment. And here's a question for you gentlemen and our listeners. So now that we know that, all right, the way we left Afghanistan, the Afghan military is pretty much given up, like instantly. The Taliban is probably now more equipped, better than they've ever been. I mean, they have all the stuff that we've given the Afghan military on top of all the stuff that we left behind. What happens next? Like, so we pretty much given our enemy a means to build an army.
That's where I fear for the surrounding countries.
Yes.
I think the issue that the Taliban will have, and again, this is where we got to keep our eyes on nations like Russia and China, is the Taliban is now well equipped to do a lot of damage in surrounding countries, potentially even take over surrounding countries. I think it might eventually turn into one of those. What if you look at, was it the was it the Roman Empire that literally just exhausted their soldiers and their equipment? Like they tried stretching too far when expanding. Was that?
Yeah.
Rome, or am I getting mixed up? Yeah.
So when you look at, and you know, so let's think about, and I want to go back to the point before we get too far away from it though. You guys were talking about their neighbors. Afghanistan is uniquely boxed in though. When you look at them geographically in the Middle East, okay, they've got Iran on their western border, okay?
Yeah.
And Iran they are an unstable, they're a loose cannon, okay? You have Pakistan to the southeast, who hates India, okay? And then you've got these wild cards, all the wild cards to the north. You have Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, all within border reach of Afghanistan, okay? And I had a brother of one of my college friends who he actually, and if you saw this guy, you wouldn't think that he was a missionary because he was just ripped and built out of his mind, but he knew Russian, and he went into Kazakhstan, and he said, you know, that's probably those people. I mean, you want to talk about a country that's, you know, has the Russian influence but are very Muslim in their belief. You know, you get all these, I call them the stand countries. You get all these stand countries to get on the same page, and if they do get on the same page and they say, hey, Afghanistan's got this stuff, you could see a lot of stuff go sideways in a hurry.
Look how quick ISIS grew.
Yeah.
When that happened.
Well, and that was, once again, and something else that's swept underneath the carpet there. ISIS is another one of those instances where we tried to fund local warlords in the Syrian civil war. We tried to fund local warlords, and then they took that money and they took that training, and guess who they became? That was ISIS. That was us. Nobody talks about this stuff, and nobody wants to talk about this stuff. And what makes
nobody wants to hold our U.S. government officials accountable for their failure at foreign policy.
Because we are still trying to do foreign. I have always felt this. I think that we are doing foreign policy in 1940 style. Okay,
I would agree with that.
You cannot go in and because everybody loves democracy and everybody loves. There was this episode when I was still watching Family Guy. There was this that I forgot what Peter said. Oh, don't you know that they love us in Iraq and they love democracy? And they show this guy and he's in his Islamic and he's sitting there washing his BMW, and all of a sudden these girls come up and start kissing each other. And, oh yeah, democracy. It's not like that, I mean, Europe was hungry for democracy. They saw the threat that communism was, and they accepted our help, and they accepted us because they knew they had enough generations who knew what life was like before totalitarianism. And they wanted to get back to that. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Iran, for the last, probably since World War II, that was probably the last generation that knew what life was like before corrupt dictatorial leadership. And so when you say the Afghan soldiers, they laid down, they duck tail and run. Well, I could see why, because they don't know how to act in the face of adversity. I think, Travis, you guys could have probably trained them for a lifetime. And as soon as they start seeing the white skin go away, and they see all the air support go away, holy crap, we got to do this on our own now? Joe Biden made the statement today in his speech when he said, that the Afghanis have to take the initiative. If they want it bad enough, we talk about how whether we say we wasted 30 years or whether we were there, or 20 years, or we were wasted 20 years, or we were there for 20 years. And at some point we have to, and I know this is where I'm kind of split on the issue too, but after 20 years, if you haven't got it by now, you're not going to get it. And that may be an unpopular decision, that may be an unpopular statement, but at the same time, I agree with you guys when you say we don't just pull out overnight. We need to start saying, okay, here's our timeline. All right, guys, we're in 15 months, we're going to pull out. We're going to gradually start declining the amount of troops that we have. We're going to take our crap with us. We're going to take all, doing wholesale just, hey, soldiers, pack your duffel bags and we're on the next C-130 out of here.
That's the thing. They didn't even pay us for that stuff. We just said, screw it, have it.
I would love to have a financial report.
Oh God.
I
wouldn't.
What do they call that? The GSA. I would love to have a GSA report of what the financial outlay was of what we left behind.
Oh, I know there's got to be a report out there. It's, oh God,
it'll be buried underneath piles of paper in Capitol Hill.
Yeah, pretty much. It's, I really want to make this. I really think the failure in Afghanistan was on the U.S. government. The U.S. military did exactly what they were supposed to do. Our government is the reason. I truly believe it's our government is the reason we failed there. And our president being defensive like that was honestly kind of a joke, considering he's been in the government the entire time we've been there. He's part of the reason we are at this mess. And I'm really disappointed in the lack of leadership we saw today too. I mean, No questions. Didn't take a single question. Just read off his telecom and just walked right out. Like,
He wouldn't have been
we
able
have
to.
No.
we have questions. The people want to know what the hell's going on. What's the plan? Like, you sent troops there. Okay, how are you going to get everybody out? When is everybody coming home? Like, what is the plan? Like, we have a right to know this.
And it's also convenient, don't you think, that the House and the Senate are out on summer break right now as well.
Yeah. And apparently, supposedly, he went back to, what was it, Camp David immediately after.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't fact checked this, but that's what the conservative news sources tell us.
Multiple news outlets are reporting.
Yeah, so it's like,
well, no, and
the
what I did see was from the White House. The White House did say he did in fact go back to Camp David.
And I would have a hard time. Here's the thing, and this is why I could never be a big level politician, because now if Joe Biden has any relative or any cognitive thought going on in his head right now, if I were him, and I would have one hell of a hard time sleeping tonight. Because,
oh my God, yeah.
You know, when you see we saw the pictures. We kind of joked about it, but it was true. We saw a CNN reporter. We saw a tweet of it that we put on our group chat today of a CNN reporter who was, she was already in her Muslim garb. She had to wear a headdress and everything. She's a white, and she was like, "They're screaming death to America." They're, we know what's happening. We know, and like Sean said, we're seeing raids on stores. We're seeing.
Hang on, but what was the second part she said, though? They're screaming death to America.
But they seem to be friendly.
Yeah, but they seem to be friendly. Like,
what?
Yeah, that same reporter the day before was like in the CNN booth over there, completely uncovered, like, wearing normal clothes. And then of course today they're like, yeah, we better keep you from getting stoned to death out here.
To all of our CNN fans, if you actually believe them as a legitimate news source and you saw that today, what the hell? That's all I'm going to say.
They're chanting death to America, but they seem friendly at the same time. I'll see if I can put this on. I'll copy this and put this on our.
Yeah, so here's what I'm curious to see, because we didn't get any answers from our leadership. So what happens if the Taliban don't honor our deal and Americans are attacked? What happens if there's a fight that breaks out? Like, is this going to be a replay of what happened? Is this going to be a replay of Black Hawk Down and what happened in Somalia?
The old boys from Scott Air Force Base are going to fly over to Whiteman Air Force Base. They're going to load up a couple of Moabs. They're going to fly directly to Kabul, and they're going to make that goddamn airport look like a big old bowl of popcorn. They're going to lay the hammer down. Yeah, who knows? I don't want. I'm sick of the fighting. I'm sick of the violence. I don't want to hear another crazy, super lib go on some rant about human rights here in America and then also argue about how, Joe Biden pulling out of the war like this was the best thing that ever could have happened to us, when you don't give a shit about human rights. You just want to look cool on the internet. So it's going to be interesting.
I'm just really disappointed and pissed off by the lack of leadership. I mean,
not we haven't heard really much from Kamala Harris.
Yeah, not just from
either.
Biden. Even our vice president. I mean, God, like, come on. Like, even if they were Republican, I'd be disappointed right now. Like, this is just such a.
She hasn't done any kind of press. She just tweeted. That's it. She's just tweeted.
By the way, I just posted that. If you guys want to see that, I just posted that to our Facebook page. The clip from CNN, the reporter outside the Kabul embassy. But we could go 1,000 different ways with this, and we are running out of time. But we could go 1,000 different ways with this. But I'll leave with this. I mean, I would like to think that the Democrats wouldn't do this, but the brood of vipers that they are. And I say the same thing about Republicans too, so my Democrat friends don't come writing tweets to me or whatever. But I think that this may be the beginning of hanging Joe out to dry. Travis, when you said lack of leadership, I totally agree with you on this 120%, because I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when the Joint Chiefs of Staff were sitting with him, probably in the Situation Room, and they were saying, "Sir, here's what we've got on the ground. Here's what, I would really want to know who the advisor was that said we need to get out. Who was it? Because you guys being military guys, I guarantee that I would be surprised if it was a military advisor who said we need to pull out, because, like you guys said, all the money, all the equipment, all the things, all the stuff that we put in there, and Joe made he tried valiantly to make a point today when he said, how many more American lives are we going to have to sacrifice, and in lack of a better terms, in this losing cause? How many more people, And so he tried to soften the blow that way, but at the same time, I was kind of like, come on, man. Come on.
At the same time, though, when are you going to own up to the fact that our government screwed this whole situation up?
Oh, yeah.
Like, where's the self accountability there? I mean,
there isn't any. And that's going to be it. When Congress comes back into session here in Labor Day's in 3 weeks. So after the Labor Day break is over, we're going to see, will you see the Defense Committee on Defense come together, or the Armed Forces Committee rather, come together and say, okay, let's investigate this and let's look at this? No. It's going to go back to
COVID.
And this was a break for the news cycle, because COVID was, is losing traction, and so now we're going to go. Let's while the magic trick's being done over here, here's something else over here to divert your attention with for a little bit. I honestly, and that's something else I could go on about. We need to talk about it length sometime too. Is that certain things are a distraction to keep our minds.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that's definitely a topic we're gonna have to hit on for sure.
Yeah, I think next week too, as we kind of learn more about this, and then also I'd really like to kind of get your guys' thoughts next week on the earthquake in Haiti and response to that.
Yeah, that's
left over 1,400 people dead.
Yeah. I would love to talk about Haiti too, because we've actually had Clopton students on the ground in Haiti 5 years after that last earthquake, and people say that it still looks the exact same, like the earthquake just happened yesterday, and the billions of dollars we pumped into Haiti. So,
well,
not surprised,
gentlemen. We'll definitely be in contact with each other throughout the week, kind of figuring out, following more stories as we roll into the night here, and it's about, day and afternoon there. I'm sure a lot more videos and stuff like that are going to surface by morning time of what's exactly going on over there. So we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled. Before we sign out, gentlemen, is there anything else you guys would like to add before I sign us away?
Shortly, I just want to say this. Folks, this is the times now where you need to really, really, really be paying attention with a critical eye on what's going on in the world. We cannot stick our heads in the sand and bury our heads and be oblivious to what's going on. At a future time, I would like to talk about some other things too, about how a lot of this is, pointing toward certain things that I believe are going to happen someday. But, let's be aware of what's going on in your world.
Yeah. Everything he just said, really. And yeah, that'd be a cool episode to do, like maybe predicting what the future may hold for us. That'd be kind of cool.
Believe me, I could fill a show with that.
What's that book, 1984?
Oh my gosh, Big Brother. Yeah,
I'll just end it right there.
Yeah, one of my favorite books.
Well, for our listeners, again, thank you guys for everything you do for your podcast needs. Make sure you guys check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, right here on Facebook Live. Again, please join us. Give us a like, give us a share. Check out our YouTube page. where you can like, share, and subscribe on YouTube as well. With everything going on, we try our best to shed a little bit of light to inform you guys what's kind of going on, and give a little bit of our take. Hopefully next week we can maybe try to find a guest or two, and we will keep the ball rolling and bring you guys up to date with current events, and give our pointless opinions about it. That's what we like to do. So with that said, this has been Travis Kirkendall, Andy Van Beber, Sean Phillips. We are the Voice of Reason podcast. We can't wait to talk to you guys. Till next week. Have a good one.